All right, welcome back to the No Quarter Given podcast. I'm your host, Jason, with Peter Blake. TJ Rives has been with us, Paul Stewart, and we have a very special guest, a longtime Buccaneer, 13-year Buccaneer player, Mr. Dave Moore. Dave's been on the broadcast of the Buccaneer Radio Network, now in his 15th year, working alongside TJ Rives and Mean Gene Deckerhoff, the former Pitt Panther. Dave Moore, back in the day, played, 15-year NFL career. 13 of those are with the Buccaneers. So, Dave, welcome to the No Quarter Given podcast, sir.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and talk with you guys.
I appreciate you having us, and
you
we're all
left
glad
out, if I can interrupt, you left out Roxbury High Schools, Dave Moore, from Jersey, then to Pitt, then to the Buccaneers. We love getting that in whenever we can. 83.
Now, Dave, were you a consultant with Saturday Night Live late night at the Roxbury?
That was a different.
I'm not sure where that came from, but obviously, Roxbury's drawn a lot of attention since then.
Yes.
Well, I was going to ask him if you could do the dance, like Will and Chris could dance.
Yeah,
he is doing it.
I've seen it plenty of times.
And remember, Buccaneer fans, you can check out the video podcast on the Powers on Sports YouTube channel, where you can see TJ, Paul Stewart from England. I'm in Tampa. Peter's in Clearwater. Dave Moore's in St. Pete. Global. Last week, Dave, I was in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, doing this at 12 midnight. And so we had a big. Yeah, so appreciate that. All right, Dave Moore, give me a quick thought on the Eagles last week wild card matchup. You were in the booth. The game was a beatdown in epic proportions. I think the game was over. I think the first 10, 12 minutes of the game. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, TJ and I talked about it before the game. The biggest thing was the Bucs needed to come out and start fast. They had a tendency in recent weeks to be slow, and Philadelphia, watching the film and following them, as the game goes on, they got stronger. So we were talking about that in a big way, to be able to generate a run game, be able to protect Tom Brady. The biggest thing on defense was to be able to contain Hurts. Once he got outside the pocket, he was able to do damage with both his legs and throwing the ball down the field by extending plays. But, welcome back, Shaq Barrett, JPP. They did a great job of keeping him in the pocket, and then the coverage guys did their part. So defensively, they did a tremendous job, and it was all that we hoped for. And offensively, a lot more reps for these younger receivers that are stepping in, making plays. Unfortunately, a couple of the offensive linemen, hurt their ankles, and that's obviously the big question mark moving forward. They were able to get through the game. Philadelphia was the last in the league in creating sacks, but they wound up having 4 against Tom Brady, who's the least sacked quarterback in the league. So obviously a concern. Obviously the Rams are looking at that, getting ready to tee off on this offensive line. So hopefully those guys are healthy. That's going to be a big question mark.
All right, TJ, real quick, your perspective from field level. Was there any, I don't know, trepidation or any, the Bucs played very confident. I like they came out in that no huddle offense, that first drive, went right down the field and scored. Just your thoughts from the sidelines.
I thought that the key was not just the opening touchdown drive. When they got the ball back again later in that first quarter and scored again and made it 14-0, you don't want to say it's completely over. We have to be careful about that. But, man, you're in great shape with Tom Brady at home, turn the defense loose. And, Dave, we can't overemphasize enough. I know Jason and Peter, Peter was watching. Paul was obviously watching late night in England. Jason was there in the north end zone by the pirate ship. That place was electric and loud. And it was a big factor once it became 14-0, correct, Dave?
Right, without a doubt. And we were talking about it. It was such a special experience because last year, yes, what they were able to do was unbelievable, but it was, if there was anybody in person, it was limited. And even the Super Bowl, they gave a lot of tickets away, and each team had to get their small allocation. It just wasn't the same experience from both a fan standpoint and a player being on that field, feeling the energy of the crowd, being involved in a ball game. And when you're out there and your defense makes a play or you make a play on offense, and you can just feel that crowd and how intense that noise becomes, when you're the away team, that's challenging to be able to, to communicate and do your job and try to dismiss all that because it becomes overwhelming.
Dave, as a player, talk to the fans about your experience. And you were a guy that was always on the end of the line. You weren't right next to the quarterback here.
Yeah, no, yes,
audibles, all that stuff. How did you when you were in a hostile environment like a Arrowhead Stadium, like a Chicago, Green Bay, how did you handle those things during the weekend? How did the Buccaneers practice those kind of things?
Well, I mean, they practice it. They come out with big speakers and they'll put them right behind the offensive huddle and they'll blare it up. And some of the coaches like to use crowd noise. Others like to use music, but it's tough. I mean, when you're on the road and especially in the run game, you go to the silent count, the passing situations. But when you're at the end of the line with your hand down and you're trying to watch the ball with one eye and figure out who you got to block with the other.
And watch Reggie White with the other eye.
And he always lined up real wide. So you had to be like a lizard and have eyes on both sides of your head because you couldn't watch the ball. So you were always late. And then by being late, he was so fast off the ball, he was already up the field before you got out of your stance. So it's extremely difficult in the running game. I always like to be in motion or off the ball if possible, but a lot of times it didn't work out that way. But very, very difficult, not from a communication as far as your responsibilities because you create hand signals and stuff for that, but just getting off the ball on time, getting a jump on a route in a passing game when there's a guy has your man-to-man and you're trying to beat him off the ball. They get the fair advantage. And it's very difficult. And that's why you see guys, leave early and twitch and do all kinds of things due to the crowd noise. So playing at home this time of year is invaluable as far as giving you that fair advantage.
Peter Blake, go.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Reggie White here, Dave, was that your toughest assignment? And talk about that a little bit. And if it wasn't the Minister of Defense, who was it?
Reggie White was, but people still ask, and I'm like, Reggie White, without a doubt. Now, listen, we played him twice a year when he was in Green Bay. I was the fullback. I was in motion. I lined up on that tight end. And I came in motion one time, and I thought I got him. He started to give, and all he did was reset his hands and walk me right back into the backfield. He was a guy that no matter what he didn't tape his hands, his fingers. He looked like he got off his couch, threw his shoulder pads on, and walked out in the field. You see these guys with the boxing tape job and all this fancy stuff. He didn't wear gloves. He didn't have a stitch of tape on him. He just basically got up, put his shoulder pads on, and came out to play. I remember playing in Green Bay, and Scott Dill was offensive tackle, and I went out on a pass route, and I came back, and on my way back, Reggie White's yelling and pointing at him, and he's like, Jesus Christ loves you, and I walked back to the huddle. I was like, what'd you do? He goes, I cut him, and he didn't know I was coming. So that was first down. So second down, he sacked the quarterback. Third down, he sacked the quarterback, and on fourth down, he blocked the punt and defense safe. So needless to say, they tried never really to get the guy too angry at you because he would completely dominate a game when he wanted to. The best part about him, though, is he didn't play very hard every play. So most of the time on third downs, when he decided to play, I was on a pass route. But in the run game, you couldn't move him if he didn't want you to move.
Wow.
All right, is that the most? I'm sorry. Is that the most important component to this Bucs offense versus the Rams? Because you talk about Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd, and of course Von Miller. When you have that running game, then you can keep that pass rush off of a Tom Brady, in your opinion.
Without a doubt, down and distance is a big thing. So being productive on first down is really a big component of the game plan. How are you going to do that? Now, it can be run, it can be pass. Tom Brady will be patient, he'll take the check down, but it's imperative that they don't get in those third and 8 to 10, because at that point, and especially due to the health of the offensive line right now, knock on wood, they were healthy all year long, and now they got two. Obviously, the all-pro right tackle is tough duty, but now you're getting down inside where Aaron Donald will line up at all four positions along that defensive line. So if they feel like there's a weakness, they're just going to move him around and put him there. But without a doubt, protecting Tom Brady is going to be the key. And everybody knows, that's really the only way to slow down Tom Brady is not give him enough time to dissect your defense, because we heard Bruce Arians talking about the last couple of weeks. If he figures out what you're doing, and everybody has a little wrinkle they put in the game plan, and usually halfway through the first quarter, he's got that figured out. And if he has time, whether it's, Antonio Brown out there, Godwin, Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller, whoever's out there, he's going to find the guy that has the best matchup and get it to him. But the only way to really slow him down is really not give him the opportunity to sit back there and pick your defense apart.
And Aaron Donald is a tough guy to move, kind of like what you were talking about with Reggie White. That's going to be a challenge. But this is a retro podcast. This is looking back on the history. And we got to bring in the unofficial historian, Paul Stewart, who's been dying to talk about 1999 and the divisional round with the then Washington Redskins. Scoop, the floor is yours to ask Dave Moore a couple of things about 99.
Well, first of all, I'm going to go through my video archive and look for clips of you trying to block Reggie White now, Dave. So expect to see that on Twitter in the next couple of days.
So, yeah, I don't know if I ever successfully, my attempting to block him, you'll probably see a lot of.
But yeah, going back briefly to last week against Philadelphia, yes, Tom Brady had 4 sacks, but they were very much a case of him going down before the pass rush got to him. So he was getting the ball out in 2 seconds. And the phrase that we used sort of jokingly was he was getting the ball out faster than a pair of Indian mating pigeons, because for those of you who don't know that, that's pretty fast. So he was doing that. It was very much a case of, look, get it out. If it's not there, take it. We know we've got the defense to hold this. That's not the problem. So I'm not too worried about the 4 sacks we took last week. Obviously, the Rams are different. But yeah, going back to 99, I mean, the championship game in St. Louis, it was then. I wasn't calling that game for British TV. I was working off camera. But what are your memories of the Bert Emanual play, Dave?
Oh, yeah, that was it when I was in the Rams, right? So
correct, the Rams game.
That's when they scored. We were in a 2-minute drill. And Bert Emanual had caught the ball right down the middle. We rushed back to the line, got up. It was like a non-factor. Like nobody even questioned whether or not it was a catch at that particular time. And then they came back and said that it was not. And everybody was extremely confused on the sideline in conversation like, that was a catch. It caught the ball. Now, yes, the ball touched the ground. And obviously, we all know the history after that. They changed the rule. But during the game, it was never and, you see offenses all the time. Like, if it's a questionable catch, they're going to rush to the line. They're going to snap the ball as quickly as they can, even if it's a run, just to make sure that the play stands. But we didn't. We just went on about our normal business in the hurry up style of offense, because it was in our minds, it wasn't a questionable catch at all. So that, that obviously, became a huge factor. And talk about loud, that place. TJ, I don't remember if you were there or not, but that place, they were pumping it over the loudspeaker. I mean, we were on the sideline, and I was physically yelling at Clyde Christensen, trying to communicate what personnel and what plays we were going to run for the upcoming drives. I mean, it was insane loud.
And I was not there that day, but I know you guys have talked about that in terms of the dome environment, et cetera, trying to be able to hear or whatever. And again, I think a lot of the Tampa Bay area feels like we owe the Rams one for the 9-0 NFC title game in 1999, and then 11-6 in the then TWA Dome against the St. Louis Rams. I don't know if you agree with that, 83. Do we owe the Rams one right about now in the playoffs?
Oh, without a doubt. And we owe them for one back in September that the Bucs didn't play particularly well out there. But yeah, without a doubt.
Dave, I'm going to ask you something as a player. That 99 game, it was the first kind of big run that the Buccaneers had back to deep into the playoffs. You were it was the defense of you guys versus the greatest show on turf with Kurt Warner and all those guys. What kind of brutal finality was it when you lose a game that way, 11-6? You had the catch by Prohl down the sidelines, the no catch by Bert Emanual that went against you guys, and you lose the game 11-6. What is the brutal finality of a game like that when you're one step away from the Super Bowl?
Well, listen, we knew as an offense after that game that for the defense to do what they did and hold them to 11 points with a tremendous throw and catch, that ball couldn't have been placed in a better spot. And that ball, I don't know that he ever got 2 hands on it altogether. But to not be able to produce enough offense to outscore somebody you give up 11-2 with a high-powered offense like that was, was very frustrating. And then obviously there were some changes made offensive coordinator-wise and stuff after that. But, we had come a long way to be able to get there, and our expectations were to move the ball better. But remember, we were a run team, and that noise that we talked about earlier in this podcast, that's a factor. When you are reacting to the guy on defense coming off to you, you're not going to win the line of scrimmage. And that's where it becomes extremely difficult. And, you look at this Philadelphia game this past weekend, they were the number one rushing team coming into this game. And the Bucs had not really done a great job stopping the run recently. But you put that noise out there and have these guys try to get off the ball on time and be able to be physical and attack the defense on their side of the line of scrimmage, it becomes very challenging to do that in a loud environment. And then obviously we just didn't generate enough passing game. We had, that was the year we lost Paul Gruber, left tackle in, the game we won the division in Chicago, and then we wound up losing Jason Odoms earlier in the year. So we're without both of our starting right tackles. But that's why we relied on the run as much as we did. But, there's no excuse. I mean, you got to find a way to, win a game and move the ball regardless of the crowd and who's showing up to play. Every team's dealing with it now with the injuries. You can see it.
And just being one step from the Super Bowl as an athlete.
Yeah, you're talking 4.5 minutes. It came down to the end too. Yep. And it was that they were saying before we went into the game, like, all right, if we win, we're going to land on the play, coming home from St. Louis, and we got to be back at the facility by 9 o'clock the next morning to get on a plane to fly to the Super Bowl. So it was one of those where you didn't have that week in between. So it was going to be like a boom, boom, turn around and have to get ready to go play.
Do you know something? I've never watched a single play of that Super Bowl. I refused to do it. I didn't cover it for British TV. I've never seen anything of that because I was so upset about it.
Well, we appreciate your loyalty,
the Rams-Titans Super Bowl.
Yes, Atlanta. That was Atlanta. Peter Blake, talk about the 2000 Monday night game.
Well, I mean, that was revenge. I mean, you guys, the whole team. I mean, I talked to one of your former teammates in Chidi Ahanatu when I said Rams. He got upset. You had to have that emotion in 2000, right? I mean, that whole team at that point, and there was still at that juncture a playoff spot on the line. Talk about that big time win on Monday Night Football.
Right, and that just kind of shows you the difference. Talk about a loud stadium. That's about even in today's measures, it was about as loud as Raymond James had ever been. And people were on their feet the whole time. Of course, some big plays with Warrick Dunn and, Shaun King and, the defense making plays. And, that was more of an exciting offensive game as far as score for score. So from a fan standpoint, probably more exciting to watch. But it's just a great football game. And, two teams that, well, at least we felt like, we owed them for that for sure, and certainly played like it and found a way to win in the end.
And what's incredible is that game went from 11-6 in 99 to 38-35 in 2000 on Monday
exactly
night.
Right.
I mean, just an absolute Monday night classic of epic proportions. Go ahead, TJ.
I wanted to share one more while Dave is here just for another couple of minutes. So we have done these games. Dave has played in them at the highest level with all the crowd. And then we had the most bizarre of circumstances in 2020 where we end up, because of the COVID-19 guidelines, not traveling. And there were a few fans at some of the Buccaneer games, a few thousand fans. But then for last year, when the divisional round playoff game happened with New Orleans and then the NFC title game happened with Green Bay, Dave, relate this. It's crazy where we're sitting in an empty Raymond James Stadium calling the game off TV while watching this, like all the fans are watching on TV. Relate what that was like for you, because it's surreal even to talk about it to this day for me.
Oh, for sure. And it was hard. I mean, I'm sitting there and in between plays, I'm looking out in the field with the sprinklers going. The lights are off, they have it barely lit up to see what's going on. And we're trying to figure out what's going on from two computer monitors. I got to watch one to see the whole field and then kind of see who I'm looking at because they all look like ants on the other video. But, it was frustrating because, you wanted to feel the excitement of being at the game and, getting a feel for, how things were going in person. You can feel momentum a lot better than trying to watch it on a, TV monitor. But that's why I was saying in the beginning that, this Philly game was really such a great experience, especially for the fans who have been so loyal. And, yes, they got to see on TV their team make it and win the Super Bowl. But at the same time, those diehard people that go every year and every game, weren't able to go and experience any of them in person unless, they were lucky enough to get one of the few seats that were available.
And TJ, you got to interact with the 1979 Ron Jaworski, who the Bucs took care of in 79, courtesy of Leroy Selman and company. Tell your quick Ron Jaworski story.
So Jaws was doing the game on national radio last week, not the Eagles broadcast. And by the way, the Eagles broadcasters were not there because of the COVID-19 flare-up.
Wow.
That's right. Merrill Reese and Mike Quick, who do the Eagles games, they did not travel to Tampa for the playoff game. As it turned out, it saved them misery in person and a miserable flight back, as it turns out. But Jaws was there doing the game nationally for Westwood One. We talked, Dave Moore, on this podcast, Paul, Jason, and Peter and I, about the 79 win, the first ever playoff win in franchise history over Jaws and the Eagles. And he remembered everything about it. He said, I remember several things. It was hot. He goes, I remember those orange uniforms. He goes, I remember Leroy Selman killed me like three or four different times. Leroy was sacking him. So it was just great to see Jaws. And that's hard to believe, Paul Stewart, that was 42 years ago. And the wild part, Paul, pick up on this. The Bucs beat the Eagles that week, and the next week played in the NFC Championship game against
the Los Angeles Rams, who they'd already played earlier in the year as well.
It's crazy Twilight Zone that we're playing the Rams again this week. It's wild stuff. There's no doubt about that.
Well, Dave, we're going to let you go here. Go into your closet, get your warmest winter coat because you're going to Lambeau. Hopefully, maybe not. Maybe if there's an upset, we might be hosting, but potentially get that warm gear out for that trip to Lambeau next Sunday afternoon.
The trip that we missed a year ago, 83, in Lambeau in the NFC title game could be coming, depending on what happens this weekend. If the Bucs win, maybe going to Lambeau. Now we're going there to experience all of it. We may get the do-over. We may get the mulligan, Dave.
Well, we played after the last win in Raymond James Stadium. We beat the Detroit Lions in the playoffs, Tony Dungy's second year, I believe.
Right.
1997. And then we went to Green Bay. And at that time, I want to say the temperature was 9 and the feels like was 3. And it was like the 5th coldest game in Green Bay at that time. And we wound up losing up there on the road. But what a great experience that was to go play a playoff game in Green Bay. Really, we played them for the 3rd time that season. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we lost all 3 of them.
Yep. Unfortunately.
Yeah, actually, you're right.
But a win last year at Lambeau, who knows what could happen if it works out that way. And if Johnny Lynch, your former teammate Dave Moore, and the 49ers find a way on Saturday night to win that game against the Packers, and now Sunday's game is to host the NFC title game. How bonkers will that be? We'll see, boys. We will see.
Well, Dave Moore, 15-year NFL veteran, 13-year Buck, 15th year on the Buccaneer radio broadcast, along with TJ and Gene. Have a great broadcast on Sunday. We really appreciate your time. You did a great job reminiscing 79, 99, 2000. Dave had a great career as well. He was a part of you were the long snapper for the longest field goal in Buccaneer history.
How about that?
Bryant. People don't realize Dave was a great long snapper in his career as well. When they didn't have just long snappers on the roster, they usually had a reserve player, a tight end kind of guy was the long snapper. So major kudos to you.
By the way, there's a couple of moments, including the first ever Buccaneer touchdown in Raymond James Stadium history. The guy we have on the podcast caught it from Trent Dilfer on a one-handed stab. The highlight is on buckpower.com, watching Dave Moore catch the first ever Buccaneer touchdown in the new stadium. The man's been around some big time moments. Let's hope there's some more here in this January in this playoff season, 83.
Yeah, that would be great. I appreciate you guys having me. I enjoyed it.
Awesome, Dave. Well, Buccaneer fans, you are listening to the No Quarter Given podcast. We were going to have a NFC Championship edition No Quarter Given podcast, win or lose, but I'm very confident the Buccaneers are going to get it done. Maybe going to Green Bay, maybe hosting Raymond James. We will see. But again, Dave Moore, Paul Stewart, TJ Rives, Peter Blake, great work. And Buccaneer fans, we will see you next time on the No Quarter Given podcast. Let's go, Bucs!
Go Bucs!
Go Bucs!
Go Bucs!